What's up, and welcome back to Nowstalgia Pod, giving you your weekly look at what's going on in pop culture. My name is Pat Sheehan, joined by my trusty co-host Dave Martin Swagger. Dave, how you doing today, man?
Doing well. Just storming these streaming sites, man. We're taking it back. We're stopping the seals. You know how it is.
Yeah, as we move into 2021 officially, and the American experiment seems to be not going so well. Talking about Stormin', we'll probably be talking about Storm and Norman as we do our top 10 movies of 2020. But first, we're going to talk about some 2020 movies we didn't get to review in full yet, and we had the pleasure, I would say, of watching this past weekend. But first, before we get too far into it, if you're not subscribed on YouTube, why not? Go to youtube.com/nostalgiapod and hit that subscribe button, as well as soundcloud.com/nostalgiapod to follow us anyway
No
you would
downside.
like to. Yeah, just a click, just a notification when these videos are posted. You're getting that good content in your ears. And Dave, we were fortunate enough to both get into the Amazon. Was it like a pre-screening or
Correct.
early screening of One Night in Miami, a movie that's drawing quite a bit of buzz for I think a number of reasons that we're going to get into. But the thing that I noticed first when doing a little bit, looking into this movie a little bit, when I first heard about it, was Regina King uh, directing this adaptation of a play that has been in Los Angeles and in the UK, not on Broadway yet. But the fictional telling of a night in was 1965, I
Yeah. After
believe.
Muhammad Ali beats Sonny Liston, the night that follows.
And Muhammad Ali, Cassius Clay at the beginning of the movie, Muhammad Ali by the end, Jim Brown, Sam Cooke, Malcolm X are all celebrating the win or in the ring by Cassius Clay. And looking at, I think, some very interesting perspectives on uh, the role of black men in the social justice movement of the 1960s. Um, I guess first, like, what was your experience just getting a chance to see this movie before it's out on Amazon next week?
Yeah, it'll be out on Amazon the 15th. After playing in like token theater release back in December, so it's nice to get this in even just a little early, and uh, knowing that it was a stage adaptation from the Kemp Powers play. Kemp Powers also wrote this film version. We just talked about Kemp Powers for his role in Pixar's Soul. Very strong year for him, without question. Knowing that it's a stage adaptation and having just seen Ma Rainey's Black Bottom on Netflix, you have preconceived notions about what the movie is and what the movie will not be. And I was happy with still how theatrical I felt the movie was, despite largely taking place in one setting, like a lot of theatrical adaptations does. Um, it still had that cinematic feel, I should say, and I was really just struck with the acting, and I think that was kind of the buzz going in, was that it was a movie with strong acting, and even though it's a real life meeting that happened, obviously the dialogue, these scenes in the hotel room is completely fictional. No one really knows what they did and didn't do or talk about that night. But I think the creative license in this case is really good, and it makes sense that this has been a successful play because of how resonant the topics are, and how capable these famous figures are as avatars for these thoughts that still resonate today. So I quite enjoyed it.
Yeah, and you're talking about these performances that we get, and you have obviously Leslie Odom Jr., whose star has risen a lot since he played Aaron Burr as the production of Hamilton, the original cast. But really, the most tenured screen actor that you have here is Aldous Hodge,
Yeah.
who you know from The Invisible Man, Hidden Figure, Straight Outta Compton,
Hmm.
going all the way back to first time I remember seeing him was Friday Night Lights, the TV show, where he played Voodoo Voodoo. I forgot the last name of the guy, but he's an opposing quarterback, and um, you know, all respect to Aldous Hodge, but maybe not somebody that when you think of like top tier actors immediately comes to mind for you. So you kind of look at this cast and maybe going in, you might say, there's not really a big name here that's drawing me in. But I think you walk away and you're really impressed with, I think, everybody. And Hodge would probably be my fourth favorite performance in the film. I think especially the dynamic between Kingsley Ben-Adir and Leslie Odom Jr. playing Malcolm X and Sam
Mhm.
Cooke, respectively. The tension between them, the back and forth dialogue. I mean, they definitely have the meatiest parts to play, I'd say. I mean, uh, Eli, is it Gory or Gore?
I think it's gory, double
Yeah,
E there.
Gory. Um, he gets to chew the scenery a lot.
Yeah,
Kind of really playing up the Cassius
yeah,
Clay
very young
accent. Yeah,
at the time,
yeah,
supposed to be. Yeah.
and bombasticness, but really the movie is between Malcolm X and Sam Cooke. Tell me just your thoughts around Kingsley and Odom Jr. in these roles.
Oh yeah. Well, Leslie Odom Jr. is obviously a good piece of casting as a
Hmm.
legendary soul singer because Leslie Odom Jr. is a singer himself.
Got the
So,
pipes.
and he has good acting chops on top of that. So that adds to the performance when he's actually doing the singing. And we've
Hmm.
already seen him do it. We know what that's going to be. And it's really a wonderful contrast to have that with Kingsley Ben-Adir's Malcolm X because their kind of conflict, I think, is really really great. Like, yes, they're talking about how white run society dictates their lives, and you have the scene like I think a really strong scene early on with Jim Brown goes to meet someone in Georgia
Mm,
that he's known for a long time and just still experiences this like blatant terrible racism, right? And like it's a really stark scene. So you have like that kind of obvious stuff, but like they actually kind of gravitate away from kind of the open discussion where everyone knows where they stand when it comes to like the black experience. And Malcolm and Cook seem to focus more on like the community and
yeah.
helping the community and things like ownership and how black power dynamics and like how you should be operating when you're successful and actually beating white society. And I think that's the kind of stuff where again it's still a really resonant topic. You can think of hearing that from all kinds of entertainers, whether it's someone like even like a Kevin Hart has talked about that kind of stuff before when he's doing interviews, right? um
Hmm.
or like Diddy or Jay Z or something, right? Like it's
Yeah.
a common idea, but to hear it from them thinking about that in the '60s, right? And this day when this happened, this meeting is only about a year before Malcolm X is killed, and Cook also dies tragically not too soon after that. So,
Yeah.
um, you have that hanging over it, that heaviness if you know the history, and the movie makes a good point of reminding you about Malcolm's history in particular if you didn't. Um, to have them like that with that heaviness and that I think that weight because it's coming from them, and then you're discussing these themes I think really eloquently that happen to still resonate today. The writing is really impressive.
Yeah, it's interesting to take these four black stars who are really at the height of their powers during this time. Sam Cooke had multiple hits on the top 100 chart by that point, had already had his own label, had all of his masters, like he talks about in the movie. Muhammad Ali obviously just ascends to the top of the boxing world and will go on to be one of the most visible and recognizable people in the United States for the next 2 to 3 decades. Jim Brown, obviously, right next to like OJ Simpson is two of like the most famous football players. I mean, OJ comes, I guess, a little bit later. Jim Brown's more that OG football,
Mhm.
but
Yeah.
it's really like you have these people at the height of their power, and it throws them into this discussion about what's the responsibility with that power and how do you go about using that to help your fellow black man out. And I really the line of dialogue that really stuck most with me, or I guess the moment that stuck most with me, was the when Sam Cooke is talking about um, how he sold that other singer's song to to I forgot who it was, like the Rolling Stones or some
Yeah,
other band,
exactly.
and
For her
then that
cover.
yeah, and then that song gets played over and over, and instead of making all the money off it going to the top and then falling off the charts, every time that song gets played, they get royalties from that, and that's how he is moving, his fellow man forward. He's helping to economically break free of the constraints of the white man in America. And Malcolm X then takes out the vinyl and puts the Bob Dylan song. Blown in the Wind, and plays that song and says more about our experience than anything you've ever sang. And just like I really loved that back and forth because I think it just so beautifully like summarized the issue at the heart of the movie. Is like, what do you do with this power when you have it, and how do you help move forward, but just in a way that wasn't totally like in your face, because it's just such a layered argument. And then as they both go their separate ways and talk, you kind of hear them both like admitting that they each were right in different ways. But it's a mix of using all these different facets of your powers. It's
Mhm.
really interesting and thought provoking. I really found that to be probably the part of the movie I connected most with. Any other scenes or moments that really like connected with you?
I think they did a good job of having levity
Mhm.
come in here and there, whether it's like the bodyguard scene or when he comes into the room, or when Cook and Brown are talking about wanting to get some women involved in the party.
Mhm.
Or I think the funniest thing for sure was when they ask Malcolm what kind of ice cream he has, and he's like vanilla and vanilla, and it was right on the heels of them roasting him for not being like a good party host. And I
Yeah.
was like, oh, this is perfect. And uh, I think they do a really good job of contrasting the different personalities that those guys had on top of different careers and uh, different ways of approaching similar viewpoints. So that was good. And heck, even some of the supporting characters, really small roles, right? You have Lance Reddick as one of the bodyguards. Everyone knows him from John Wick recently. Lawrence Gilliard as
And
the
The
trainer.
Wire. Wait. I'm not gonna let you gloss over that. From John Wick, like
Well,
Lance
he's in
Reddick.
everything. Is he in The Wire? I didn't know he's in The Wire.
Oh yeah, he plays Captain. I forgot what his name is, but
He's been a cop a billion times. Yeah.
he's great.
Okay.
Go
Yeah.
ahead
Well,
though.
Lawrence Gilliard's from The Wire. I know that.
Yep.
Uh, Trainer, and then Jeremy Pope and that Sam Cooke scene as a Jackie Wilson. I like that. Heck, you even got a Fountain Blue cameo. Shout out Marvel's Mrs. Maisel. Um, so even though again it's largely set in one location, has that stage play feel, I think Regina King does a really good job of like whether it's like rotating that camera around or just kind of moving out and about when with the hotel from time to time. It definitely felt still plenty cinematic to me, and I actually was quite happy to see Aldous Hodge in like a meaty role like this, 'cause I've always really liked him, and he's kind of been doing a lot of like oppressed, like imprisoned even characters recently, like in Clemency and what was it, Brian Banks. But like I think this was a really good role for his, and I couldn't really tell, but I feel like he actually. Do you think he like bulked up for this? Like he looked pretty big as Jim Brown.
Uh, yeah, he was pretty big. I mean, I don't know what else he's working on. I don't know if it was just for this, but he definitely looked huge. And um, Eli Gorey looked like
Oh yeah,
enormous, like
he was just like
linebacker.
peak human specimen shape for that. Yeah, no
Yep.
question. Um, but performance wise, though, I think Kingsley Benadir is the clear uh, highlight, just because he's someone who's been around a little bit. Like I knew him from High Fidelity. You said you saw him in
Noel.
Noel, the noted Disney Plus rom com holiday comedy. But have a movie like this, where no one really knows your name as far as acting goes, and
Mhm.
to Malcolm X again, that's a character that's been played with great esteem by Denzel Washington, the same way Muhammad
Mhm.
Ali's been done by Will Smith. So to take on these characters and bring something different to the performance and not just try and copy what had been done before, I think is really great. And I think for Kingsley, kind of the way he would shift between being understanding and being kind of like mild mannered, then also like really sticking to what he believed. And um, as the movie progressed, you really sense his foreboding, his caution, his sense of dread about his situation. He was expressing that a lot, right? Both his standing with the Nation of Islam and also his, the prevalence of the FBI
Mhm.
wherever he went, right? Stuff like that. And again, you know how it ends. But heck, even when the movie starts and I see Malcolm, I like the fight, for example, wherever he is, I'm like, man, like, is Malcolm moving right? Like, I'm just scared something's gonna happen to him because and then you can tell that he has the bodyguards, the hotel and stuff. But
Yep.
yeah, Kingsley Benedict, without question, I think is tremendous in this, and he's definitely in the mix for Best Actor. Best Actor is pretty loaded this year, so not a lock he gets nominated. Although I think One Night in Miami's gonna do pretty well at the nomination. Seems like it's pretty safe for a Best Picture nomination, and Regina King even will probably contend for a director nomination. So we'll be hearing more about the movie, no question.
Yeah. Is this Regina King's first directing?
She's directed some
Yeah.
TV. This is her first film.
That's what I thought. Really impressive from her.
I mean, if she was to pick up a Best Director nomination right after winning like a bunch of Oscars and Emmys in like a 5 year stretch, like the run is just incredible right now.
Well, I'm hoping she gets the nomination because I think this is definitely worth it. But um, very, very solid movie, and definitely check it out when it drops on Amazon Prime this Friday. Or is it on Prime or is it just dropping on
It's
Amazon
on.
for
It'll be on
rent?
Friday on the 15th
Okay,
on
so
Prime.
give it a watch because I know you have Amazon Prime, and I also know you have Netflix, and I hope that you got to watch Pieces of a Woman, the Vanessa Kirby Shia LaBeouf movie. And of course Eliza Schlesinger, which everybody came to the movie to see her. But
I was here for Benny Safdie actually.
it was funny because when I saw his name in the credits at the end, I was like, oh, like I literally like did like, oh, okay, because I was trying to place who it was, and I was like,
Mm.
I couldn't remember.
Did
Um,
Okay? Did you recognize Jimmy Fails? He's
no.
the guy who Kirby's character meets in that party scene.
Hmm.
That's
Where's he from?
he's from Last Black Man San Francisco.
Oh
This is
yeah,
like his
wow.
second or third movie after that.
Uh,
And of course, you got Sarah Snook from Succession as well. Really nice, well-rounded cast.
it is. It's directed by Cornell Mandruxo, I
Yep.
believe it's pronounced, and executive producer Martin Scorsese is probably the big name that you'll see attached to this. But yeah, this is a movie where Vanessa Kirby's character Martha and Shia LaBeouf's character Sean are having a baby at the beginning of the movie. Kind of lays out a little bit of the background on them, leads up to the birth of the child. The birth doesn't go well. Shortly after the baby's delivered, baby passes away, and then it's about really their journey in dealing with the grief of this loss, as well as kind of interacting with their support system. Ellen Burstyn plays Elizabeth, Martha's mom, who's I think a major factor in this movie and a propellant of the plot moving forward. So a lot of there's a lot of scenes in this movie that really stick out to me. It almost feels like the movie kind of goes through like high points and lulls a lot. Um, but again, similar to the movie we just talked about, One Night in Miami, I think you get 2 to 3 top tier performances here. I think we would say that we're Vanessa Kirby stands here after the last Mission Impossible movie and her standout role in that. Um,
Yep.
I thought she was great. What did you think of her in the role as Martha?
Yeah, really great. I feel you have to think like as far as movies go, this is her first like really big starring role. Let me show off the chops kind of movie
Hmm.
because they got the Emmy nom from The Crown, being the first Princess Margaret on that, and then movies obviously huge revelation in Mission Possible Fallout as the White Widow, and basically runs that back for Hobbs and Shaw. But those are supporting roles in blockbusters. So
Hmm.
you have this. He's like, okay, now Vanessa Kirby's like, not only do you like watching me and think I'm talented, but let me just show you how far I can take that, right? Which is she's in the majority of this film, not all of it, and there's a lot of like non-verbal acting that she's giving. So I think it's a very strong performance, and she is being pegged as one of the best actress nominees and probably actually one of the safer ones. So I would expect that to hold, and that's great because I think she's tremendous.
Yeah, I saw one criticism online that this movie, for being named Pieces of a Woman, doesn't actually like tell you much about who Martha is until like the very, very end. You know, like we know she's in some sort of like marketing role, but we don't really know
Mm.
exactly what she does. We never really know how she's feeling prior to the birth. I think you get a sense that her and Shy are in a pretty good place, but you don't really hear a lot of like, is she excited about it? Is she not? And then, you know, the rest of the performance is pretty muted. Like she's really kind of sunken into herself with grief, and I think inability to really process that grief until the court scene at the end. What do you think about that criticism? Do you feel like you really get to know Martha as a character throughout the movie?
Well, I think that kind of goes into criticism of the movie. Like I like the movie. I think the movie's good. I don't think it's amazing though, and I think that goes with really the whole middle of the movie and actually kind of the ending too, where there's just a bit of a heavy-handedness to the symbolism, notably the bridge
Hmm.
and the apple seeds, the apples. And I was like, yeah, I feel like I kind of just like saw this coming because like what at the end when you get that courtroom scene, I'm like, okay, there's no way this movie's doing a courtroom scene. Like we just saw some really good courtroom scenes this year in Mangrove and Trial of Chicago 7. Like that's not what Pieces of Women is. So you kind of saw the way it was gonna go as soon as that scene starts, and to me that just kind of like felt like it was from a different film. They kind of like didn't. I don't know. I feel like they kind of like they kind of skipped some steps where it's like I understand. Yeah, she there's some existential dread. She's just having a difficult time processing, as you assume anyone who's felt this way would. And for
Hmm.
what we know, uh, Mandruxo and Kata Weber, who wrote the film, this is kind of autobiographical,
Yeah.
vaguely, from what we know. And I understand that, like that sentiment. That sentiment's clear early, and then I kind of think we just spin our wheels a little bit. Like I think if anything, it's like when you have them lash out at each other when the family all gathers at Ellen Burstyn's house, I believe it is. Like
Hmm.
that I think that's where like, you really get like kind of like the themes and the viewpoints kind of coming out. But everything else, where it's like you kind of just watching Martha stroll and like look out the window, and like there's a lot of times where she's not saying a whole lot.
Hmm.
So yeah, I don't know. Like I don't know if I necessarily needed like a ton more characterization, but I think the movie itself kind of just meanders to the next like big scene.
Yeah, and I think the scene that you mentioned, the scene with her and Ellen bursting in Elizabeth's house, and how she comes to kind of challenge Martha to like face what's going on instead of just trying to like move through life and not really try to process this grief. And she tells a story about um, how when she was a child, her father went into the slums in Nazi Germany, and her mom was like hiding under floorboards to keep her quiet, and
Right.
was almost going to have to like give her up at the doctor's suggestion, and then she kind of pulls through. And I agree. I think like sometimes like the symbolism in the movie is a little bit too on the nose, or too like in your face. Like even in the that same scene, or when Shia LaBeouf's outside and that like lone dog walks up and just kind of like sits there, it's kind of like, oh, okay, I get it. Like he's like getting ready to like leave and go off on his own. Like he's like totally apart. Like it just feels like there's certain things that kind of come across. But I did really find the first like 30 to 40 minutes of the movie really, really compelling. Um, and I think I'm trying to like put my finger on exactly what it was about that worked so well, because obviously like the burst scene is incredibly intense and hard to watch.
30
Um,
minutes, one take. It's like that's the cold open. Like it's very very drawn out. Yeah.
yeah, and Vanessa Kirby and Shia LaBeouf are acting their asses off in that scene, and I found it hard to look away, but also hard to watch at certain moments, especially once you can tell things are not going in such a good direction. Um, and even afterwards, like Shia is very much like not wanting to let go of his child yet, and Vanessa Kirby is just like wanting to like pack the nursery up and not have it in her face. And I found like those scenes to be really interesting. And then it just kind of like becomes a bit of a dud. I think like the second Shia like goes to see Sarah Snook as the lawyer, it's kind of like, all right, now I'm a little bit out on this.
Yeah, I think there's too much Shia,
Hmm.
um, and like the performance he's giving is kind of familiar to like what he did with Honey Boy a little bit. Like it's like, and frankly, I did find it a little difficult to watch at points given the recent allegations against Shia
Hmm.
LaBeouf from FKA Twigs in particular, and also other people like Sia, where it's like, yeah, like this kind of feels like the a portrait of the case story of Shia LaBeouf we've been told in terms of someone who has trouble with substances and also, has doled out domestic abuse as has been alleged. And I was like, this is this is a bit rough, to watch. And for what it's worth, Netflix has removed his name from the for your consideration pages and pushes for this movie. So it doesn't seem like they have any interest to really keep that shy stuff going. But as far as the movie's concerned, I still think he's giving a good performance. But it's almost too much. Like I think the time spent, like the detour of we see Shia LaBeouf is uh, falling out of sobriety. That's one thing, but like he also is having an affair with Sarah Snook, just kind of off the cuff. Like that didn't feel like that went anywhere at all.
Hmm.
That time could have been used better to flesh out more of how uh, Vanessa Kirby's character is feeling.
Martha,
I think that
yeah.
would have been a better choice.
Yeah, I agree. And I also would have liked a little bit more time with Vanessa Kirby and Ellen Bierson together. There's obviously a lot of tension there, and I would like to know a little bit more about the background. Like, I want to know a little bit more about how their relationship exactly evolved that way. Because it seems like the mom is supportive, but pretty much only financially, not emotionally. And where that comes back around, especially as Ellen Burstyn's Elizabeth is obviously dealing with some form of dementia or memory loss as she's aging, and how that's affecting Vanessa Kirby as well. Because oftentimes that can be an inflection point for people in a relationship that's strained with a parent. So I feel like there's just a lot more interesting stuff, especially when you're trying to like flesh out the womanhood piece of this. And I agree. I think a little bit too much Shia, especially because sobriety is such a huge portion of like the beginning. Like, don't want him to fall off the wagon, so to speak. And then when he does, it's just kind of like, okay, like it's just kind of like known that he is, and no one seemed to really care too much about it, which I found a bit I don't know, off putting.
Yeah.
Um, I don't know. Any I guess I wanted to ask you this. Did you see any similarities between this movie and The Nest?
Oh, no, I didn't. That did not come to mind. Actually,
The
interesting.
dance scene with Vanessa Kirby was what kind of like brought it to mind for me. I mean, those scenes look kind of similar.
Yeah,
Carrie Coon has that scene in The Nest, but also I think obviously Shia's character is more uh, blue collar than
right.
Jude Law's character in The Nest. But I think they both kind of are like these two people living like, or who have these huge lies that they're hiding from the people around them
Yeah,
and not really able to face it in a sense.
mhm,
But I don't know, just saw
yeah.
drawing those comparisons.
Overall, I just kind of wish it was more cerebral movie than it ended up being because, as I mentioned with the courtroom scene, like the whole thing about like the suit against the midwife, I thought Molly Parker was pretty good,
Hmm.
especially in that first scene. But like, not that I'm an expert on childbirthing practices and ethics, but like it's pretty clear to the audience that like there was no grave crime committed. So I felt like we were
Hmm.
just wasting our time with that. And again, it was pretty evident that Kirby's character's not gonna become really vindictive and hyped about this civil suit to get money. Like,
Right.
so if the movie was a little, I think, stripped down even more and a little cerebral, thing could have been even better, especially given the strength of the performances in the movie that we did get. Um, Also, one thing I noticed is this movie's supposed to be set in Boston, but I looked it up. They
Thank
filmed it in
you.
Montreal, and I was like, I mean, this just doesn't look like Boston. This kind of looks like a city. I thought that was an odd choice, especially like the bridge. I'm like, all right, well, I know that bridge doesn't exist. It can be a
Hmm.
fictional bridge, but it also just doesn't look like the Charles River. So
Yeah.
I was a little confused about the setting there.
Me too. It was funny because I was watching with my partner Julianne, and I was like, "Where is this taking place?" She's like, "It's Boston." And I was like, "This is not Boston." And then she's like, "Oh, I'll set it on the ambulance, blah blah
Right, and the
blah."
cab too. It said it.
Yeah,
That's about all you get.
and then at the end, like the guy in the court scene, like the court clerk has like the heaviest Boston accent ever, and I was like, "Oh, okay, so we finally get like one Boston accent in this movie," but it was just so random and
Yeah.
I don't know, kind of funny. But
Uh, Actually,
I
on that note, there's a Netflix movie filming in Boston right now with Leo and Leonardo DiCaprio and Jennifer Lawrence. And that this is a movie where it's filming in Boston, but it's actually the movie set in New York City, and they booked they moved mailed in New York City yellow cabs to make it authentically New York, but they're doing it in Boston. Just weird stuff, film production sometimes.
boy. Well, check Pieces of a Woman out on Netflix. I think it's still worth your time, even if
Yeah.
it's not a perfect
Yeah.
movie.
Kirby and perhaps Burston as well seem to be on the track for nominations.
Hell yeah. Let's get into it though, Dave. The 2020 year in movies are we're finally getting to that top 10 list. We always record this one a little bit later because we want to get to as many movies as we can. And a lot of the award worthy movies are dropped end of year. So we're getting to catch up. And that's a little even later this year with the changing of the date of the Oscars. Talk about that real quick.
Yeah, so normally to be eligible for the upcoming Oscars, you have to have released theatrically at least a token theatrical release by the end of December because the Oscars are usually end of February, early March. Given COVID, months ago they made the decision that you can release your movie up through February 28th, 2021 to be eligible for um, the Oscars that will be happening at the end of April. Um, so as a result, a lot of 2020 awards films effectively delayed their releases until February, and thus only select critics have even seen these movies to this point. So uh, this year, those movies would include Nomadland, which Chloe Zhao is the best director favorite at this time. You also have The Father, in which Anthony Hopkins is expected to be nominated for Best Actor, as well as Minari, which I was lucky to see early, but that's an A24 film that's quite great as well. And there's other stuff as well, but those are I think that really the big ones. Not to mention stuff like News of the World and Promising Young Women were released just in theaters on Christmas, but will be coming to VOD on January 15th because they're universal releases. So there's some stuff that the layman just simply has not seen. And uh, given the way that this awards calendar has been decidedly stretched, that's just the way it is this year. And heck, there's going to be other movies that from the jump have only been set for 2021 release, but will be eligible for the upcoming Oscars, stuff like Judas and the Black Messiah, Malcolm and Marie, Cherry, for example. So it's a weird calendar to wrap your head around if you care about that sort of thing. So either way, there's movies we haven't seen yet. When we review those movies, if we really feel strongly about altering the list, we'll mention that then. But just note that there's some stuff we still haven't seen.
Well, and talk about things we haven't seen. We didn't see a lot of movies because with COVID, theater shutting down, a lot of theatrical releases have been pushed back to this year. Some even into 2022 at this point. So our lists compared to where we thought they were going to be probably going to look a lot different. If you go back and listen to our most anticipated movie pods, we got maybe like half of those movies.
Yeah.
So well, I guess like it just as you're going through your top tens and thinking about this year in movies, uh I think for me, com- uh, what it could have been and what we got, I would say I'm pleasantly surprised with, right? Because I'm looking at my list, and not all these directors are going to be in my top 10, but we got a Christopher Nolan movie, a Spike Lee movie, we got a David Fincher movie, the Steven Soderbergh movie,
Mm-hmm.
uh, Aaron Sorkin, Judd Apatow. We got big name
Yeah.
directors still dropping movies, which I'm thankful for. Like
George Clooney,
this,
even.
yeah, this year could have been a total loss, and I think we still got some quality movies out of it. How do you feel about the year just in total?
Yeah, I feel similarly. I feel similarly. Like obviously the blockbuster list. Like if you're making a list of the best movies of the year that grossed at least $50 million, like there's only so many movies that made really a lick of money because if you think about it, the best movies generally are not released at the beginning of the year unless they're awards holdovers, as previously mentioned. And the box office completely closed by mid March. There was only a handful of big movies that really got to roll out the way they wanted to. I think notably would be Birds of Prey and Bad Boys for Life. Bad Boys for Life is the highest grossing uh, U.S. release of the year domestically. The biggest movie overall would be The 800, which is a Chinese film because the China box office was able to completely recover this year due to the way they were able to manage the crisis, unlike we could here.
Imagine
Um,
that.
yeah, imagine that. So apart from Tenet releasing later in the year, you really did not get another blockbuster release. Everything was delayed or in some cases sent to streaming, like Mulan and Soul.
Mhm.
So it's obviously very, very strange and abnormal, as anyone who has a pulse knows by now.
Yeah. We talked extensively about it, so go back and listen to our thoughts on the state of movie theaters. But I think this is probably a good as good a time as any to jump into our top 10, Steve. And um, why don't you? Well, I'll let you go first. What's your number 10 movie of the year,
I
2020?
ordered my hot sauce an hour ago. Is it hot sauce? Is that the line?
Yeah,
Applesauce? Hot
I ordered
sauce.
my hot sauce an hour ago. That's your number
Tenet,
10.
baby.
Oh, it's my number
Tenet.
one. All right, let's
Oh,
talk
fuck
about it.
yeah, it is. Let's go.
I mean, wait, why do we like movies, Dave? We like them because they tell cool stories. They take us to places that we never get to go, especially this year. We didn't get to
Mm,
go anywhere. I had
yeah.
to watch this in my fucking living room.
Yep.
A Christopher Nolan movie, which is meant to be seen in theaters, I watched in my living room. If it's ever released in theaters, I'm going to go back and see it there. And
Mhm.
this
I,
transported
I
me.
recommend that, by the way. I was able to do that, camping out, making sure no one was there. I saw it with two other people with a mask on, and it was still a great experience.
And I'll do the same if I have to when I can. Um, when I think about movies and especially what I missed this year, and that's probably a big theme of these. This is everything I like about movies. It's big, it's bombastic, huge set pieces, great performances. I think a real star-making performance for John David Washington.
Oh yeah.
Um, and even if it doesn't totally make sense, you're not going to see anything else on either of our lists that comes even close to the size of this. And I think I missed that this year, and that's probably plays a factor in why it's my number one.
You can't tell the year of movies in 2020 without Tenet, because Tenet did try to jumpstart the theatrical movie business. Grand scheme of things, it did fail.
Yeah.
Um, Made 360 million worldwide in a vacuum. That is a really great number for a completely original film,
Hmm.
and yet it should have made more, and it needed to make more to justify its large budget as far as the
Yep.
business is concerned. Either way, it's still a brand new original film from Christopher Nolan, and this time it's Nolan does James Bond,
Hmm.
and it fucking slaps. It's also some of the best action he's ever made,
Yep.
and just in terms of like action, like coherence on screen, it's incredibly impressive. You mentioned the lead performance from Washington. Obviously, Robert Pattinson, a supporting role, continuing his tremendous run, and other great appearances as well. You think Aaron Taylor Johnson just coming off the top rope to explain some plot developments that I think the average viewer doesn't really even care to understand. You know, it doesn't matter
Hmm.
about the red team and the blue team. You know,
Nope.
it's just Aaron Taylor Johnson fucking speaking with his chest, and
Hmm.
it's awesome. You know,
Yeah, and when I'm thinking about like there's so many moments in this movie that I really come back to, but I think about that moment when they just do the whole like second act backwards.
yeah.
And I'm just like, what a fucking flex. And it's just so fun to watch. And it's just, yeah, Tenet, it's a movie I'm probably going to go back and watch more than any other movie this year, which I
Hmm.
think is, partially my Nolan fandom, but partially also it's just the most fun I had watching movies, I think. So,
Yeah, yeah. I mean, And like the critics are certainly critics. It's certainly polarizing. Most Nolan movies are polarizing, but this one in particular is even more polarizing. I think partially because of the elevated expectations and hype laid on it because of how it was released in 2020, but also because it's his most challenging from a plot coherence standpoint because the progression of the plot in the world of Tenet is not A to B, right?
Mhm.
Like as you watch Tenet, you understand that, but even with all of that, like the ambition is just so stark and so impressive. And again, because it's Christopher Nolan making it, there's just a lot of expert stuff, being done.
Yep.
And um, I'm just really, I'm just really hopeful that he can continue to command large budgets. Will he get $200 million again? Maybe not, but I hope he can still get a lot of rope because very few people can put butts in seats with something completely removed from IP. The IP is effectively just Nolan himself, and um, really happy that they tried with the box office with this. Then again, it would have been awesome if this was completely punted down the road to 2021. But then again, uh, I'm happy it came out the way it did versus being one of the 20 HBO Max releases for WB in 2021. So
Hell yeah.
it's at this point everyone can see it, easy to rent. So I think
Mhm.
just go with it. I mean, isn't that one of the lines at the beginning? It's like you need to stop trying to make it all make sense or something.
Yeah.
I forget how it's
Stop
phrased.
trying to understand it. You need to feel it. Like,
Yeah,
yeah, that's all this
damn
is.
right.
Just feel it. And one of the things that makes this feel so, I think, I don't know, exhilarating to me is you get an awesome score too. One of the most memorable for
Mm,
me of the year from Ludwig Göransson. So
yeah,
there's
he's
just so much to like.
about at the top at this point.
Yep, he's probably the top two or three.
Him and Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross in terms of like current people scoring films.
Yeah,
I think.
I think we'll be talking about a film that they scored a little bit later.
Oh,
Number 10 for me is The Trial of the Chicago 7. Did this make your list?
this did not. I think I had this at 12. It was
12.
on the list for most of the fall, but no, it just missed for me.
So, full disclosure, Tenet's actually my number two movie I saw this year, but we decided Portrait of a Lady on Fire cannot count because that would be my number one. But that's technically a 2019
Okay.
release.
Yeah, I know,
Um,
same thing for me. Saw it this year. Yes,
so,
13 is Trial of the Chicago 7 for me.
so Trial of the Chicago 7, obviously a loaded cast. Sacha Baron Cohen, Eddie Redmayne, Yahya Abdul-Mateen, Jeremy Strong, Mark Rylance, Joseph Gordon-Levitt. I mean, it goes on and on. You get maybe one of the best surprise cameos of the year from Michael Keaton
Oh yeah,
in playing Ramsey Clark, which is just,
playing Michael Keaton. You mean?
yeah, right. Playing Michael Keaton, playing Ramsey Clark. Um, just like an electric moment when he shows up. Uh, you know, Sorkin, we know his politics are always going to be a part of his productions, and you can't really avoid that at this point. But Trial of the Chicago 7, I think it dropped in October, I believe,
Yes.
early October,
Hmm.
and it the story felt so resonant to the time we were in leading up to the election, the time we've been in this year in regards to the George Floyd protests, and I think just in general, like the idea of pushing back against a government that is not uh, working for the people, is actively harming people. Is this obviously centers around the Vietnam War and the protests regarding that. But this is just probably my favorite like courtroom drama of the year. And even though it's not like traditional courtroom drama of like the gotcha and like the defense attorney is able to like save it or the prosecutor is able to like figure out the really smart way to like win the case. It's more so about how using the courtroom as a platform to show the muzzling or the attempt to muzzle these protesters and these people who are fighting against injustice. And then you get some really fun moments outside of the courtroom too, whether it's Redmayne's Tom Hayden and Baron Cohen's Abby Hoffman going back and forth with each other and talking about you know their their ideologies on how to go about fighting for injustice and how to gather attention and how you need to present yourself. Actually, in some ways, kind of reminds me of a movie we just talked about, which is One Night in Miami. in terms of like that dialogue of between Cook and Malcolm X in that movie. Um, yeah, it's just a really memorable movie going experience for me. I think there's some it's really well done, really well put together. You really feel like you're in Chicago when they go back to like the scenes when like the protesters are
Mm,
chased by the police.
yep.
Um, just really well done. Yeah, I don't really have much more to say about it. It's really memorable. I'd recommend anyone go watch it. It's on Netflix for free. So check it out.
Yeah, for me, it was after seeing the first small axe film from Steve McQueen, Mangrove. I had my perception of Chicago 7 colored a little bit. Still really like it, but contrasting those two films, I think, is really uh, worthy to do and helpful. And comparing, I think, McQueen's intimacy with Sorkin's more, I think, grand gestures in terms of two films that are taking place, two stories that are taking place at a very similar time. It's quite interesting. But yeah, Sorkin dialogue is a cliche term at this point, but he really knows how to wrap you up in terms of that courtroom scene. Um,
Hmm.
it's quite enrapturing, even if it kind of has a hokey ending, you know.
For sure. Yeah, that ending with Gordon Levitt is not good, but the rest of the movie is. So definitely worth the watch. Dave, you're number 9.
Number 9, we just talked about, would be One Night in Miami, directorial debut for Regina King. Check out our review of this, youtube.com/nostalgiapod. It'll be on Amazon Prime for everyone on January 15th. But just to rehash, that energy you get from the Ken Powers script regarding Sam Cooke, Malcolm X, Muhammad Ali, and Jim Brown meeting in a hotel room and hashing out the uh, various views they have on Black power and Black politics and white society, and the different thoughts they have on how to better their community as well as themselves, just makes for really electric uh, scenes and dialogue. And Kingsley Benadire in particular gives a really, I think, eye opening career making performance as Malcolm X, which again is impressive because of how well Denzel Washington did
Hmm.
that about 30 years ago. So, uh, even though it's based off a stage play, it still has a really, I think, strong cinematic quality to it. And yeah, bringing those four guys together, those four Titanic characters, and I think really kind of eloquently speaking to a lot of themes that are still quite resonant today. Again, similar. I said this for a lot of movies. There's a lot of movies that take place in the past this year that still feel resonant today politically and socially. So,
Hmm.
and that is still quite easier said than done. So,
For
One
sure.
Night in Miami, check it out when it's available at the end of the week.
Just missed my top 10. I think I have it at 13 on my list. Um, Number 9 for me, Dave, and I'm wondering if you have this on yours, is Eliza Hittman's Never, Rarely, Sometimes, Always.
Number 6 for me.
So I'll let you take the lead, then I'll jump back in. Why is it number 6 for you?
Yeah, I mean, this is Liza Hittman's third film. Her last movie, Beach Rats, got a lot of attention, but I think, this is a really good example of a movie that uh, has a great reveal about what the title means. Like
Hmm.
sometimes you do like the Rick Dalton pointing at the screen meme when you hear the title spoken. In this instance, though, you want to like cover your eyes because of uh, that revelation. And having a movie about abortion is not about the abortion itself, but more about how society uh, seeks to control and divert people that have any inclination to ponder an abortion. And it's not done in a grandstanding way or a preachy way. It's just done in a really matter of fact way that makes for some really harrowing scenes and moments. And along the way, you get just the revelation of Sydney Flanagan in her first role as a completely unknown performer. And um, even on the side, you get some, I think, some really good portrayals of the daunting nature of transportation in New York City for the uninitiated, which I quite appreciate. Um, but I think ultimately it's just a movie that everyone should really see because of just how matter of factly it speaks to a really difficult issue that still quite prevalent today, just in terms of the access, education to uh, abortion and abortion rights and stuff like that. It's not the best watch in terms of being fun, but it's a really well put together film.
Yeah, this is a good example of a movie that I don't know if I'm going to find myself going back to often, but
Yeah,
the level of realism and the way it made me feel just completely devastated for the character of Autumn by the end
yeah,
of it, right? You know, um even though there's I think some moments of joy and I think especially seeing the way Skylar supports Autumn through all of this and is kind of like ride or die in a way for her through it is definitely heartening. The like you said, the journey that Autumn goes on in this movie is just so challenging and so tedious. And I think if there's any movie that felt just like I was watching a documentary come to life this year, it's probably this one.
hmm
You know, Eliza Hittman just created such a sense of realism and frustration and sadness and despair. And like you said, that not only that feeling of like not knowing how to work the transportation system, but feeling like you have no money, they had nowhere to stay, like everything just felt so hard for them and the lengths that Autumn had to go. It's just, you know, you get that really nice scene where they do karaoke finally and she kind of like lets things out a little bit, and that's like a very like almost like relieving moment in a sense, but then she's right back to her like confined self, and I think that's why um, Flanagan's performance so commendable. Is that, you know, for being such a young and up and coming actress, is I think her first feature film, she really does a lot with a role that's very subdued. So um, definitely a movie I'm going to remember from this year, even if I don't go back to it too much. So
hmm
that was my number 9. Dave, what's your number 8?
My number eight's a movie I saw a long time ago, back in February 2020, in theaters. That'd be The Assistant, the first movie from Kitty Green. This is a film that uh, takes place at a fictional film uh, company studio in New York City, and centers around Julia Garner's performance as a young film assistant. And people know Julia Garner from Ozark and The Americans, won an Emmy already. Really good performer. And in this case, similar to Never Really Sometimes Always, I guess you could say, there's just like a sense of dread that hangs over the characters and the audience as a result. And in this case, it's a unseen, unnamed head of the studio, stand in for a Harvey Weinstein type figure, and seeing how those gross actions are enabled and tolerated and covered up by a large support system of enablers. And you don't see any heinous acts. You don't see this terrible person. You just see everyone else in that orbit. And later in the movie, when Matthew McFadden comes in as an HR person who's in on the scam, as it were, kind of really like distills that down. And it's a small film, really set in this one building in New York for the most part, but thematically, it's just awfully resonant and feels, unfortunately, still really realistic.
Yeah, I think that this is a movie I haven't seen. I want to get to, but everything I've heard and read about it, it seems like this is a movie that speaks widely to something that's still going on a lot. So, very commendable choice at your number 8. My number 8, I'm wondering where this falls on your list, is The Vast of Night.
Ooh, number 4 for me.
Wow. Okay. Um, I'll just start off the top here quick, and then I'll let you vamp on it. If you care about up and coming directors, you need to watch The Vast of Night, because Andrew Patterson is going to be someone we're talking about in like 5 years. He's one of the best directors I think in
Yeah,
Hollywood. You know, to make something this that feels this big, but is really like just a very small, simple, low budget movie is just
Mhm.
really, really impressive. Tell me what you love so much about The Vast Night, and we'll kind of go back and
Yeah.
forth.
I mean, for less than $1 million, he made a, clear homage to Steven Spielberg and
Hmm.
films like Close Encounters of the Third Kind. It's so warm in its homage to uh, films of the past in that regard. And this set in I believe the 50s, is it? It's set
Yep,
around there.
1950s New Mexico.
Yeah, and on this, on the periphery, you get comments about race in terms of like the Native American and African American soldiers that were you know involved with the supernatural that's going science fiction that's going on in this story, because those type of people would not be trusted by mainstream society, so they didn't have to worry about them telling what's
Hmm.
going on, right? Like you have that on the surface, you have the obvious Spielberg of it all, you have just incredible craftsmanship, as you said, from Patterson, who I agree you should invest in because he seems quite grounded in
Hmm.
his terms of being in control of his career as a native of Oklahoma City that does not bother with social media. He does not seem like a up and coming director who's going to get swept up in the franchise game. So that's exciting. Um, but yeah, I mean, the movie's just super well made, super tight. Um, you know, Think about the sound design because of the,
Oh
the
yeah.
the the presence of radio throughout lots of the movie, right? Like there's so much care to it. Heck, even I was reading about this after the fact. The opening scene where you see the local basketball game going on, and they
Mhm.
took great care to make sure the 3 point line was actually the right diameter for what it would have been like at the time. Um,
Crazy.
but in terms of sci-fi, in terms of like thriller stuff, uh, it's just world class, I'd say.
Yeah, I totally agree. And the scene as you were talking that kind of came to mind, and that I think in a lot of ways could have been seen as a really cheap trick, but doesn't come across this way, is when they get the call from the caller who said that they've experienced these UFOs before, and it kind of like zooms in. I can't remember if it's just totally black or if it's like the stars are kind of there, but it's pretty much just like a black screen. You don't see characters anymore. You're just listening, and you're supposed to have that experience like you're a caller who is hearing this radio uh, show, in the 1950s, and it totally works. It totally sucks you in this like 5 to 6 minutes of like nothingness on the screen, and I just was like so taken aback by that to like be so sucked in and bought into a movie in 2020 that I'm watching at home on my television, and to feel like I can watch a black screen and be totally entertained and totally sucked into this, I just thought was so impressive. Um, and then you add on to that, I think, uh, just the feeling of like wonder, but also like dread at points, like when they go to talk to that old lady who said her son had been taken by the aliens. Just like the movie really puts you through up and down of emotions and feelings, and um, just a total masterclass. So the Vast of Night, check it out. My number 8, Dave's number 4. Dave, we're on to number 7. What do we got next?
Number 7 for me is The Sound of Metal, available on Amazon Prime.
My 7 as well. Let's do it.
Yeah, so I it seems there's a big groundswell of support for this movie from people that have seen it, and um, a lot's been made of Riz Ahmed's performance. I think he's very much in the mix for Best Actor, but also, which is I think is even better to see, is that Paul Raci's supporting
Hmm.
performance is getting a lot of love too. But this is a movie about the deaf community that doesn't fetishize or disrespect anything going on with that community, despite the fact that Riz Ahmed is not a deaf person. The movie is made with such care for that, and and movies have not always been made uh, in that regard. To be blunt, casting lots of people in that community in supporting roles and periphery roles. Even Paul Raci, who is giving Oscar-worthy performance as someone who was born to deaf parents. The
Hmm.
whole fallacy of just cast the best person, doesn't matter if they're black or white. Well, actually, if you make an effort to be more inclusive, you also do get the best results. And I think this is a great example of that. And the movie, um, largely anchored by, I think, a really central physical performance from Riz Ahmed. Um, kind of commands that feeling well, and I really like how it ends and the journey his character goes through in terms of coming to terms with his new life that is being a deaf person. Um, another movie that's hard to watch at points because it is difficult subject matter, but uh, again, really a lot of care put into
Yeah.
it, and when you have that with great performances, it makes for a good movie.
Yeah, and I think this is actually a really underrated movie about addiction, and specifically about addiction recovery and maintaining that sobriety. Um, because Riz Ahmed's character is obviously um, an alcoholic, or I think a substance abuser, or maybe just a drug addict. I don't remember exactly, but Ruben is sober, but you can still see that as his life is as he's experiencing this new obstacle that's put his life on a different path. Um, he's also struggling with maintaining this piece of himself that could have devastating effects if he doesn't. And I think that's really well portrayed in Riz's performance. I also just remember so many small moments that really touched me. I think about the scene where the kid's acting up in class and he takes him out to the slide and they start banging on it together and kind of like just feeling the vibrations, and that's kind of like the eureka moment in a way for Riz, and like this he kind of starts to find that he can still have purpose and meaning and joy and this new life where he's lost this piece of himself. um but then to kind of like have that swing back the other way as he finds where Lou is over in France and starts selling things impulsively to go see her and work things out. And the last like 15 minutes between Lou and Ruben is just totally heartbreaking.
Mm.
But then ends with that awesome moment of him sitting there, just really well done movie. One of my favorites of the year. I've recommended it to a bunch of people in my life, and pretty much everybody that's seen it has said rave reviews. So definitely check it out. Um, Dave, I think you said your number 6 already, right?
Yeah, never really. Yep.
The number 6 for me is Palm Springs.
Ooh, nice.
Andy Samberg and Kristen Milioti, or
Hmm.
Milioti, and directed by uh, Max Barbakow. So this is actually a movie that Barbakow and Sandberg had talked about for a long time. It had been kind of like an idea that they had been mulling around, this like Groundhog Day and Palm Springs type thing, and where they wanted to go with it. Um, and I don't think this is the funniest movie I saw this year. I think that would probably go to Borat if I were to look back and really
Hmm.
talk about it. Is Borat on your list, by the
It is
way?
not.
Okay. So yeah, Borat is probably the movie I laughed the most at, but I think in terms of a movie that really hits the sweet spot of rom-com that's actually funny and actually moving, and thought provoking, with some really just outlandish but funny moments. This would be it. You have J.K. Simmons coming in being Roy, who's just like this ridiculous, like
Right.
over the top character, but then gets that really sweet moment with Sandberg where kind of provides some levity. You get a lot of really fun moments between Sandberg and Milioti as Milioti kind of comes to grips with being stuck in this loop. Um, and I also think that this just, especially the time it dropped, which I believe was like right around the time that the lockdown and the stay-at-home orders started, uh, provided a sense of levity and um, like respite from a really dark time in the world. So definitely a movie I would say check out if you have Hulu. It's well worth it.
Yeah, it's probably one of the most popular movies
Of the year.
on either of our lists. Probably, other than
Yeah.
Tenet, it's probably the most watched thing here.
Maybe Soul,
Yeah,
if
yeah,
Soul's on your list.
that's two.
Number 5 for you, Dave.
Let's say like, most watched from the first half of the year, first
Yes.
7 months, without question. Anyway,
For sure.
yeah. Number 5 for me would be Defy Bloods from
That's
Netflix and
my
Spike Lee.
number 2.
Nice. Yeah, just a few years after Black Klansman, I feel like this is a level up in a sorts from Spike. You have a lot of the similar techniques in terms of Spike interstitching real life footage and dialogue and stuff, but contrasting that with his fictional story. And I think it's more effective this time around than it is in Black Klansman, whereas it felt a little ancillary. I think in Black Klansman, not that it was bad, but in Defy Bloods, um, I mean, I'm just really struck with the performances and the production values that
Mm.
Spike kind of gets out of the movie. Lots been made of Delroy Lindo's performance. I'd expect a Best Actor for him, and of course Chadwick Boseman giving a great supporting role, which is really, I think, really central to the movie and like the ethos of Defy Bloods. His role via flashback as Stormin' Norman,
Storming
and
up.
was later trumped by Boseman himself with his more showy performance in Ma Rainey's Black Bottom. But I think Lindo, his character in Defy Bloods, I think is really expert. As being a more conservative black man who willingly voted for Donald Trump in 2016, and what that represents to his fellow black men, and the differences they have. And you also get a lot of good action and just conflict scenes because it's set in Vietnam with former GIs and stuff, and it's quite multi-layered and um, thrilling throughout.
Yeah,
Really great.
I think you said it really well. Um, there's such a there's so many different messages you can take away from this movie. I feel like if you were to watch it 10 times, you'd probably take 10 different things away. Um, but I mean, not only did this movie, I think, have some of the best political commentary, current political commentary, but it also, I think, had some of the most like fun, like bro moments in a sense. Like I think
Hmm.
about Lindo and Majors and Peters and Lewis just kind of like dancing in the club to Marvin Gaye as like probably
Yeah,
one of my favorite scenes, if not my favorite scene of the year. Them like on the boat and walking through the forests of Vietnam and jungle of Vietnam, I should say, and it's just really memorable. Um, and it just feels like Spike Lee right now is just operating at probably his apex in terms of like mixing commercial success with his usual like um, political um, leanings and making it to a point where everybody is taking it in. This also comes during a time when there's a lot of political and social unrest, especially around what it means to be a black man in America. And I think this movie hits on a lot of interesting themes, like you said. So definitely, I think worthy of being on any list this year. And I'm hoping we get a couple of nominations out of this because I think it's definitely worth it.
yeah. We gave a pretty lengthy review of the movie, so check that out if you
Yeah.
missed it. YouTube.com/nostalgiapod.
Number five for me is a movie called Baby Teeth,
Oh,
which
nice.
technically,
Inspired choice, my friend.
thank you. Technically debuted in 2019, but really no one that was able to see it till 2020. Um, and man, Shannon Murphy, who directed this movie, I think it's two of my favorite performances of the year in this movie from Liza Scanlon and Ben Mendelsohn
Hmm.
as Henry, played by Mendelsohn, and the father of Eliza Scanlon's Milla in this movie is kind of um, working to hold himself and his family together as Milla is moving towards the end of her life as she's dealing with terminal cancer. And then you bring in Toby Wallace as Moses into the mix as this like kind of wild card, wild boyfriend of Milla, um, and kind of how they all come to grips and deal with this end of life and a movie that really puts you through the ringer of emotion from joy to frustration to confusion to despair. Um, Mendelsohn, who's been on fire this past year. We talked about him in The Outsider. We talked about him with Captain Marvel last year. We thought he was really good and fun. I think this is the best performance he's given, probably in his career, in my opinion. And I just find this movie incredibly charming. And I think about that like I think it was Christmas or Thanksgiving scene where they're all together, like having fun and just kind of like showing off, and uh, just a moment I'd want to live in. So definitely, definitely a movie I would encourage you to watch. I'm not sure where it's available to stream right now or if it is, but
I think it's just VOD rent.
I would pay for it if you have the scratch. So number four for you, David.
Was The Vast of Night.
My number four is Mank. Where's this fall on your list?
Oh, Mank is number 3 for me. Also, Baby Teeth's currently on Hulu,
Ah,
so
there you go.
easy to check out. Yeah,
Check
number
that
3
out.
for me is Mank.
So tell me why Mank is your number three, Dave, since it's a little higher for you.
Yeah, I mean, a movie that had a lot of hype going in as David Fincher's long-awaited return to feature films after 2014's Gone Girl and his diversions to television with Mindhunter, right? And in the process, he's taking this script that his father wrote 20 years ago, 15 years ago, and is tackling the authorship of Citizen Kane by Orson Welles and Herman Mankiewicz. A long debated and argued over aspect of film history. And um, in the process, he's also mimicking one of the key aspects of Citizen Kane itself in terms of a non-linear narrative structure. And I was just really impressed with the scale and ambition of the film. And I think unexpectedly, it's not as authoritative about the authorship angle of Kane, but in its place, something was really unexpected came about, which was political resonance once again, namely uh, William Randolph Hearst and Louis B. Mayer's interest in suppressing the leftist views of Upton Sinclair and the use of the media to distort public perception by just lying and twisting the truth. And seeing that again in a movie set in, I believe it's the late 30s, on the eve of World War II, yet seeing all these techniques, uh, media techniques that are still so relevant and common today. Really blew me away. And in the process, you get a good old Gray Oldman performance and a really revelatory Amanda Seyfried performance that was
Yeah.
really out of nowhere.
Yep. Yeah. It's the way it pays homage to Kane without, I feel like, totally ripping it off and using the story about Kane to replicate a movie that looks like Kane. But I don't know. It's just like a really impressive. Like it almost kind of put my mind in a pretzel thinking about it. Like just the way that Fincher's able to like replicate things but still make it feel authentic is really great. I mean, Oldman's awesome. Mentioned Seafried is like I think incredibly compelling as Marion Davies. And yeah, you just get like great performance after great performance, and for a movie where I guess like when you think about it and where the movie is trying to go, like how much actually really happens in this movie, right? I guess you get like Mank in the bed, you get like kind of the back and forth between the studio and Wells, and Mank and the studio, and like that whole triangle. But you don't ever actually see Kane being made. You don't actually really get much Mank versus Wells in this. It's a lot more just about this person, and who was I think, kind of like the movie, not black and white, very gray, shades of gray throughout. And um, I think exploring all of that, and making it as compelling as it was, when this was a character who at least I hadn't really like read much about or heard much about, and
Right.
was totally bought in. And you get a Bill Nye cameo. So I mean, how could you not have this in your top three of the year, right? Top four of the year. Um, great choice for your number three. That was my number four. So Dave, what's up next on your list?
Number 2 for me would be First Cow. The very last movie I saw in theaters before the pandemic kicked off, from A24, and Kelly Reichardt, the one of the queens of truly independent cinema. And First Cow, I just knew it was well liked from the festival run it had in 2019. I was very excited to see it, and once I did see it, without really knowing much about it, just really taken with it's just a movie that really works once it kicks in the gear. And John Magaro character Cookie and Orion Lee's character King Lu, I believe is his name. They once they meet and befriend each other and then get their scheme underway, it's just a really joyful time. The period trappings are evident. We're set in the Oregon Territory in the 1800s at the height of the beaver trade. It's transporting for sure, but the enterprising nature of the two characters, I think it's a really effective demonstration of genuine friendship along the way, and I think a really tactful choice of foreshadowing that's done in the very first scene in terms of the fate of the two lead characters. Yeah, A24, they they'll give any talented filmmaker a shot to make their weird little shit, and I think this is it's not the weirdest thing, but it's definitely out there, right, in terms of what's actually happening on it. But I think it's a really joyous movie, actually.
Yeah, it's not in my top 10, but it's a movie I definitely enjoyed. Definitely was impressed with how much they made it look, you know, like it was during that time. Especially for being what I would assume is a small budget movie. Um, yeah, definitely a great choice. And similar to what you said about my baby teeth, I'd say inspired because not a movie I've seen on a lot of top 10 lists that high, but I think definitely one that is worthy of being talked about in that way. Um, the next movie on my list, Dave, which is my number three, and the only movie we haven't talked about yet, is Soul. Is
Mm,
Soul on your list?
it is not.
So we recently talked about Soul. I won't go too much into it, but this is the new Pixar movie dropped on Christmas Day. Voiced by Jamie Foxx, Tina Fey is the top two, and then David Diggs also in there in a pretty cool role. No, actually, he's not the one I was thinking of. David Diggs is in a smaller role, but anyways, Pete Docter, well known in the Pixar universe as kind of being involved in many of the great Pixar movies, and more recently, probably the most acclaimed one in uh, Inside Out. But
Yep.
Soul, I think, not only continues and I think even ups the level of production from Pixar in terms of reality and just amazing animation. I mean, there are scenes in this where you almost feel like you're actually in New York City, whether it's the subway scene or when they're kind of like running through the busy city and eating pizza, like just some really cool moments. But um, a movie that I think makes you reflect. And Pixar, in some ways, you get the onwards, which are made for kids and have the overarching themes that adults can get. This is a movie made for adults, made for those kids that grew up with Pixar and are now into their late 20s, early 30s, maybe even 40s, who are like, how am I making sense of my life? How am I making sense of why I'm here? How I find joy or meaning in all of this? And um, I've really sat with the movie. I think it's made something that's been resonant with me in terms of like trying to be more grateful and more tuned into the small things in life that make it feel full, especially as a lot of those big things have been taken from us this year. Um, so I'm definitely really impressed with Soul. And if you haven't seen it, which I know a lot of people have, if you haven't, definitely check it out because I think it's a movie that will at least make you think and feel things. So my number three for the year, Soul. I think only your number one is left. Is that right?
That's correct.
What do you got?
Number one for me, a movie I was very lucky to see, would be Minari. Um, just by happenstance, the third Korean film to top my list in the past 3 years. Although notably, Minari is made by a Korean American, Lee Isaac Chung, and it's a movie in uh, set in uh, the U.S. about Korean Americans. And this came up in controversy because of the Golden Globes decision to have Minari be a international film, even though it's a movie made by Americans about Americans. But because they speak Korean in the movie, it was deemed foreign. So the Hollywood Foreign Press took a lot of um, egg on their face for that. And I think in the process, there's been even more groundswell about Minari. People are excited to see this movie when it eventually releases in February from A24. And, unlike, say, the last time I saw Stephen Yeun in 2018 Burning, now Yeun is the lead, and it's a really, I think, warm but understated performance from him. In Burning, he's on the side, more mysterious. There's a mystique to him. Sorry to bother you. He's definitely an ancillary character. This time, he really dominates the film in terms of trying to start out and be his own man and make money for his family on his own the way he wants, while also struggling to keep that family together and unified. And uh, in terms of a movie about the immigrant experience, about family bonds, and about value, figuring out what really matters to you and your family. It's tough to do better than this. Really war movie. It has a really great child performance from I forget his name, but he's only like 8 or 9 years old, and a really really precocious kid. And I think the character's name's David. And if David wasn't uh, as likable and good in the movie, I think it would have hurt the film. But the casting is quite tremendous, and I don't know if Steven Yeun's gonna get nominated for Best Actor. He's in the mix. It's a tough field this year, but I would really like to see that just because of the as a culmination of the journey he's been on of late. But Minari, definitely make time to see it when it comes out. Uh, you know, next month, and I assume that'll just be theater. So it'll be a while for the average person has even a chance to see this film, but it will be remarked upon as award season kicks off, no question.
Yeah, I can't wait to see Minari as well as Nomadland, The Father, a couple of other movies that Dave mentioned at the beginning. So our list will probably be evolving as we see those. And if you really want to see what we've been liking, where we're putting it, go to our letterboxd where we keep a detailed running list of all the movies we've seen during the year. Um, just search our names, you'll find us. But
Yep.
Dave, just before we wrap up, any honorable mentions or any movies you want to shout out for good or bad reasons?
Yeah, a lot of movies you mentioned I had in my top 20, like Chicago 7 and Soul, Baby Teeth, Palm Springs. But movies you haven't mentioned, I like to shout out Bad Education on
Hmm.
HBO, which, it's a movie. It was nominated for TV movie at the Emmys because it's bought by HBO, but it's a film. Uh, really, really fun, especially because that came out like earlier in the year. That was really welcome as like a, just a good movie that we just got to have easy access to and we couldn't do anything. Um, Also quite enjoyed Another Round, the Denmark film with Mads Mikkelsen.
Yep.
Um, you know, I mentioned Mangrove. I also really enjoyed Lover's Rock from Steve McQueen. And also, I think it's kind of been forgotten a little bit this year, but I still really enjoyed Tiger Tail from Alan Yang on Netflix, and also Emma, which is a movie I saw in the theaters right before quarantine. The Anya Taylor Joy, Jane Austen film,
Yeah.
also quite funny.
You mentioned a lot of the ones that I was going to shout out. So I just want to shout out some of the movies that I didn't like so much this year. Um, Capone?
Yeah,
What the fuck was that?
uh, it was what Trank wanted to make, and
Sure.
that's something at least.
Um, the last thing he wanted,
Yep,
my
just doesn't
second,
work.
yeah, my second to last movie on my list,
Oh,
which
it's my
is
it's my last actually.
so my last is Love Wedding Repeat, a movie you haven't seen, but it's
No.
just truly abysmal. And I also just wanted to give a quick shout out to a movie that I think has kind of fallen by the wayside a little bit, but I still really enjoyed, which is The Gentleman.
Yeah.
When we think about this year, and I think about
January.
I think about going to the movies and really enjoying a film. That might be my favorite movie going experience for me for the year. Yours is probably Tenet, but for me,
Mhm.
it's probably The Gentleman. So, shout out to movie
Good stuff.
theaters. We love you. Um, Drop us what your lists look like, or what movies we missed, which ones should be up there. Follow us on Letterbox. Follow us at Nostalgia Pod. Any last thoughts for the week, Dave?
Also wanted to mention this movie's been on some lists depending on where you look, but I'm thinking of ending things. Didn't totally click for me because it's a Charlie Kaufman movie. That's I think
Mhm.
by design, but I know a lot of people did really like it, and you'll see that reflected on some lists. But I had it, kind of mid pack for me.
Yeah, not on my list either. Um, Dave, what should people be checking out for next week?
So we do have two notable movies that we'll have access to because they'll be coming to video on demand as Universal releases after their Christmas theatrical runs. That would be News of the World with Tom Hanks from Paul Greengrass, as well as Promising Young Woman starring Carrie Mulligan, to much remarked upon film. Both supposed to be pretty good, and excited to see both of those finally. And we'll also get the debut first episode of WandaVision on Disney Plus, the first MCU entry of any kind since Spider-Man Far From Home in July 2019. It's been quite a long time.
Well, we're finally getting some stuff to talk about next week, which would be nice. The year's finally kicking off, so follow along at Nostalgia Pod. Go to youtube.com/slash Nostalgia Pod to subscribe, and also that 5-star review on iTunes. We appreciate it. We love you. Stay safe. Peace out.